Hello everybody and welcome to Purgatory Ironworks. I am your host Trenton, and we're here for part 2 of our fire tool making series. Now before we get started, it is a new year, it is 2021. We are making a concerted push to actually make this a full-time gig. So if you have a moment, please like the video, comment on the video, and subscribe. It makes a difference on the back end because in the end of the day, it's money that makes the world go round. And the more you're involved with these videos, the more we see on the back end and the more videos we can make. So take a moment and help us out. But going forward with our project today, we're going to be changing things up just a little bit. Now, in the last episode, we made this birdcage handle poker, and we did it in a very particular way. This particular birdcage, we made a bevel on the front, we made a lap joint here on the front. We also on the back fused about 1.5 inches together and then brought this down into the hook. Well, I don't particularly like this. It tends to throw the rods off a little bit, and I think it just looks meh. The gentleman that taught me, Jay Riekert, had a different method, and I'm going to show you how to do that different method today. Basically the same effect, kind of just a professional's tweak, at least in my opinion. So for this project today, you're going to need your 4 1/4-inch rods, hot rolled if you can get it. It's just a little bit cheaper. You can use cold rolled. Originally, we made these 6 inches. For this project, we're cutting them down just 1 inch to 5 inches. So you can see that I've got them tack welded up here on the end. These are not wired. They're all put together, 5 inches. For the shank of the tool, you're going to need a 28-inch piece of 3/8 rod, just like that. Again, hot roll is perfectly fine. Cold roll, you're paying extra money, but you can do it with it. And lastly, we're going to have a piece of 1/2 inch bar, which is going to be, 7-8 inches is no problem. You just need a piece of this because it's going to eventually end up cutting down to about 2.5 inches. What's going to happen is instead of using the rods themselves to be fused into the hook, we're going to make our lap weld on both ends of this the same size. So just like before, we will join the cage to the handle, but then on the back side of the cage, instead of making that into a hook, we're going to weld it to this 1/2 inch piece, and then we're going to use this 1/2 inch piece to give us the meat to make the hook. It's going to extend it a little bit. It's going to give us more material to work with. And the other thing is that it's going to prevent there from being any of that tearing or that slipping in the weld that is very common when you fuse these things together. So it's just a little bit of a nuance on there, but I feel like it makes a better product, and it was the way that my mentor did it, and I think I prefer it as well. Now, one caveat on this, Jay never actually forge welded a lot of these things together unless he was doing a demo piece. Almost all of this would have been done by oxyacetylene weld. Jay was from the old school in the 1970s, and the oxyacetylene was the thing. So when he was doing production, all oxyacetylene welds. The only problem I ever found with that is that the oxyacetylene weld sometimes had a tendency to be porous. It just wasn't a lot of great quality. You had to be careful with it. So if I have the time, I always prefer the forge weld. Looks better, looks good, and it really helps giving you that practice and getting those welds together. If you can forge weld this stuff together and you can do it consistently, you know what you're doing. So let's start off by actually forge welding our pieces together and getting to it. Now folks, remember that when you're doing your forge welding, a couple things are going to help you tremendously. One, you need to have a clean fire. Now a lot of people don't realize what most folks may. I've heard a lot of smiths say you need a clean fire. What does that mean? That is a fire that is fresh. If you have a fire that has a lot of dust that you've been running for a very long time, it's going to have a problem because you're going to have clinker and crap in the bottom. So when you're forge welding, you're getting ready to forge weld, it's usually a great idea to dig the fire, kind of restart it, just get all that dust out of there so there's good airflow. It'll help you a lot. And of course, you're going to need your 20 Mule Train Fusion cocaine. It's when Eric Clapton was being a blacksmith that he actually came up with the lyrics for a lot of his songs. You know that, right? Riding that train, damn it, out of propane. Nobody get me for that one. Here we go. Again, we're going to start with very light taps. You can see this time I am using a bigger hammer, but again, if you use it skillfully, you won't have a problem at all. And again, this time around, we've actually cranked down the exposure on the anvil so you can really see how that's working. So there is one tack weld. I'm going to come in, take another full heat, and then make that taper on that end and flip it around. As you really get good at forge welding, one of the things that you're going to be able to do is you're going to be able to be a lot more efficient in your movement, and that's going to save you a lot of time and a lot of heat. If you notice, I was able to move quickly back and forth, and because I did not lose a lot of heat, didn't waste my time running my mouth, I'm back in and I'm already back to welding heat. There we go. Let it rotisserize. Remember, roll it over, let the heat get even. And there is a nice taper for our lap weld. And we're ready to go. So let's flip this bad boy around. Let's go for round 2. Now this time, because I've got a good heat, I'm being a little bit more aggressive. But you can see very quickly it's fallen below really where we want to be. And there's a little bit of a ragged edge right there because my cuts weren't completely even. So again, this is why it's always a good deal to tack weld first and then come in with a secondary heat. Now, if I was really aggressive, I probably could fuse this together and pull it out at the same time, but I'm being very cautious here. One of the odd things that I've seen on a lot of the forums, I have a lot of people asking, do you have to use flux? And there's been a rather spirited debate about it. And the answer is no, you don't. But the counter to that, for me at least, is why wouldn't you? It's one of those situations of where, you know, can you have pizza without cheese? Yes, but why would you? 20 Mule Team borax and fluxes are relatively easy to find. I mean, I don't use anything fancy. I go down to the store and get a box of borax for a few dollars, and it does a great job. It helps with your weld, helps keep everything clean. So especially for a beginner, the question is, why wouldn't you use it? There are some odd conversations that come up online. Again, remember, you're not bringing this down to a four-sided point. You are making a wedge. You are making a lap. And look at there. It's looking pretty freaking good. Straighten that up just a bit, and then we'll get ready to actually attach this to our handle. So last time we actually put these two pieces together, our bird cage and our shank, we had to do one of two things. We either had to use a wire to wire these things together. I think you saw that when we did this one. Or you had to have a buddy that was holding your second piece. There's a couple of other techniques. I think somebody last time mentioned a drop tong technique, which is basically you just drop it on the anvil. There's not a really lot of good options. There is one other trick I want to tell you guys about. It's difficult to do. Not many people fool with it. But it will work if you're careful. If you have a very, very strong magnet, this is a 300-pound magnet I use for grinding my knives. I get this online. And if you take both of your pieces, and remember, you kind of have to magnetize these so that the ends are going to be opposite. So if you magnetize both of these in this direction, you can flip them over. It takes about 5 or 6 minutes. I've already done these a little bit. But what you want to do is you take your magnet, and again, like I said, you got to have a good grip on it. If you will run this magnet over these edges several times as such, they will actually magnetize. And if you are careful, if you will take both the pieces, and you got to get them set where you want them. Let me set this down. I can't, guys, shaky hand today. And you set it in place, you can see that it actually holds. Still hot. It's not a great bond, but it will hold. And again, it's a cool trick, you know, but if you have the option to wire it or you have a buddy, it's something that you always want to do. It's just better practice. But again, it's a neat trick. So let me put it in the fire and we'll get it fused together. So on this first weld, of course, you've got to be careful. With these two pieces on there, there's a lot of weight on both sides, so it has a tendency to want to pull that thing apart, whether you've got it wired or anything like that. So normally I do go to a lighter hammer, you know, whereas before I used the heavier hammer there. I'm going to slide down to my little ball peen because, again, when I get the welding heat, I just want to tack it together. And also remember to rotisserize that bad boy so the heat is even. Again, we're just going to do some light taps just to seat this bad boy. And now we'll go back for our full weld and we'll blend all this in. Now that first weld, those little taps, is really doing two things. One is to get everything stuck, but the other deal is that it makes everything come into contact. And if everything's in contact, that means that heat transfers much more easily. Again, you're still going to want to rotisserize, but one of the biggest issues about getting your initial weld, especially when you're doing Damascus and things like that, is getting an even heat distribution. And that does not happen until everything is in contact. Remember, as you're doing this, you really want to attack those laps first, those edges. You can see how that one's wanting to pop up right there. It's going to be no problem. I'm going to tap it down. Now, it's not welded. I just put it back into place. I'm going to come back and reflux, and we're going to do one more heat. Close that seam up, and we're going to go ahead and make a little bit of a taper on here. Once again, you can notice how you would benefit from a block. You always got that little crunch in there, that little divot, because you are going from a 1/2 inch thickness to a 3/8, so you're always going to have a bit of a bevel. But she's looking pretty darn good, if I do say so myself. Okay. So now we've got that. Now we're ready to put our piece here on the end. Now for this next part, it should be relatively simple, just like what's going on over here, except this time we have a piece of 1/2 inch bar. I've got this chucked up in the tongs. We're going to make our bevel, our lap on this piece, and simply do the same thing to the opposite end. We're not going to use all of this bar. I think this is about a 7-inch piece. We're only going to use about 2.5, 3 inches of it to make our hook, but again, you'll see the difference between this one and the piece we did yesterday, and it's pretty significant, and I think it makes a real difference in how it looks. Okay, I'm going to use our magnet trick one more time just because that's what we're doing. Again, I usually prefer a different method, but you can see it's held together well enough, so we're going to go into the fire, fuse this together, and then we're going to get about making our hook. All right, I think we've got a good heat here. Let's get our first tack weld of our piece. Yeah, we've got a good heat. Again, getting those lips. Always got to smack them lips. Be very careful when you're hammering on those slip lines, when you're hammering up there where it could have a tendency to slide. But it looks like we got a pretty good weld. Pretty good. So now I'll take another full welding heat just to be safe. I'll go ahead and square all this up, and then we'll cut this and we'll make our hook. Now, one thing I want to encourage, if your weld is not quite there, don't be afraid to put it back in there and redo it. A lot of this is going to be sneaking up on that heat. Now, if you pull that joker out and it's a sparkler, you need to be a little easier sneaking up on that heat. There are a lot of things that are going to come into play to be able to do that. You're going to have a good clean fire. You're going to have control of your air blast. There's a lot of things that come together that allow you to do a good weld. But right now, thankfully, we're done with all that welding, so we're just going to make ourselves a hook. Now, the good thing about this is that now that this piece is solid, we can draw this out very easily, and we don't have to worry about any of the slip lines with the forge weld, things coming apart, and that's always much handier for me. Also, If you didn't get a full, if you didn't weld enough of it together, you don't have enough meat to make a long enough taper to be able to make your hook. So this solves a lot of those problems. We got plenty of meat in here. Let's take one more heat and pull it on out. Now, I could be pulling this out over the horn. It'd go a little bit faster. However, I don't feel like resetting the camera. So I'm going to burn a little bit of extra muscle for your guys' entertainment. Now, one thing I want you to keep in mind, if you notice on that last run that I did not wait till the whole thing was dark. You're going to save yourself a lot of time and a lot of muscle power if you will actually go back to the fire before it goes dark. If it's dark, it's too cold. Hit that steel when it's hot. Work it, get the goodie out of it, go back to the fire. You will be much better off. I pulled the piece out as long as I need, and if you're wondering if I knew how long it needed to be, if you've got a particular shape that you're going for or you're using a particular mandrel, a very handy thing to do is take a piece of wire and actually wrap it around your mandrel to figure out how much length you need to get the hook that you want. Same thing I did here. I'm using Jay's mandrel, pull the wire around it, got the hook that I want, and copy that over to this piece. I made a mark on my anvil. Now, it's pulled out to the right length, but what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to round this off. I'm going to chamfer those corners, make them less square, so it's a little more pleasant to handle. It's got a little bit more visual appeal. You don't have to wreck it. We just want to walk down the sides here. And do make sure to take a little bit of attention and tap rounds you're in there. It just makes things look so much better. And there we go. We're looking pretty freaking good. So what I'll do now is I'll bring Jay's mandrel out over here. And just like we do before, I will actually bend this 90 degrees. Now, here's the thing, and this is a handy trick. You've seen me bend it over the corner of the anvil before, but the problem with that is because these are not joined, it has a tendency to mess them up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to heat it up, I'm going to drop this in the vise, and then bend it. Again, nothing super special about this. I'm going to go about a 1/4 inch above where the rods start. I'm still well into the lap. And I'm lying. I'm not going to put quite a 90 in there. Actually, it's a little bit more of a 45, 50 degree in there, somewhere along in there. You're going to put an angle on it. Just feel free to pick one for yourself. But it needs to look something like that. Now I'll take a heat, go to Jay's mandrel, and we should be able to get it run around there very easily. All right, we're going to push in against right here. Now you can see that that's not completely right yet. So what I'm going to do, again, I'll push in. I'll give myself a little bit of gap on that side. And we're looking a lot closer. So I'm going to go up here at the top. Bring this down just a little bit more closed. And man, look at there. That's a good looking hook. So I'm going to take one more heat. I'm going to turn a little bit of a pigtail on there and do just a little bit more adjusting, and we'll be good to go. But I want to show you this real quick because I want to show you what a difference that makes. So look at the difference in how the hook goes with this one as opposed to that one. You've got a little bit of a runway, so when we make that twist, and I'll show you this again, it's just a lot cleaner. Now what I have here is just a pair of my welding pliers. They're needle nose. I'm going to turn this guy up just a little bit, and you're going to see real quick why there's a need for adjustment, because just that little curl, boy, that takes up a lot of real estate. So you're going to have to come back to your piece and readjust it to make it look good, or gooder. We got to make it look gooder. And ba-boom, there we go. Everything's nice and reasonably centered. And come over just a little bit more. This is where your OCD kicks in, but you end up with a good, even-looking hook. Even got a little tail up there. We may end up tapping, tap that a little bit down, as one famous YouTuber once just said. And there we go. So now we're ready to do the twist on this. So we're going to drop this in our vise, again, right there where the rods start. And now, if you notice, we have a good, solid place to start our twist that's not tearing up our rods. The rods are kind of all in the same spot. Looking good there. Ba-bam. So now it's looking good. I'm going to get my piece back on here. I'm going to open it back up about halfway. And we are going to need a little bit of adjustment right there. How we looking? How we looking? Man, we looking pretty good. We looking pretty good. I'm going to make a little minor adjustment there and check it out. Let's get a close-up on her. Now, you can see we clearly have a nice long twist, very even looking, and especially pay attention to that right there. Look how much better that looks than that right there, at least to me, So we're good to go right there. Now the other thing here, notice that we don't have nearly as tight a twist with this one as we do with that one. And this is where when you do enough of these and you get the right length, you can kind of tell how hard to twist it and what you can get away with. So that's a little too loose for me. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take another heat, I'm going to tighten that back up, and we're going to retwist this. Yes, you can do that, and I'm going to advise you that until you get good at these things, you're going to be doing that a lot. So let me take another heat. Now, if you're reheating one of these bad boys, remember, these 4 rods are separate. It means that heat is not going to transfer evenly through them. So you got to rotisserize while you're in the fire. All right, we are here for part 2. So we're going to retighten. There we're closed, and I'm going to go ahead and twist on down. Okay. That should be a lot tighter and nicer. So now I'm going to back off 1/4, 2/4. How we looking? Oh, look how that's much nicer. That's much, much nicer. That's much more better. So again, I'm going to use my pliers to kind of do a little bit of adjustment. Again, if the heat's a little off, it's this stuff you're just going to have to deal with. Take our wire brush and a little scrub. And again, if there's anything that's off there, if you see that there's a bit of an adjustment that needs to be made, it is always better to have this locked in the vise and then tapping the piece than trying to do this freehand on the anvil. The other thing you're going to want to do is make sure that the sides of your bar are lined up with your hook as well. So sometimes you have to detwist or untwist or twist just a little bit more to get everything into alignment. Tappy tap tap. There's a lot of things that are made better with a scooch. Now see, we got a little bit bigger gap right there. I'm gonna, it's cold now, but well, we're either gonna have to take some heat or gonna have to get some channel locks for that, and it's gotten a little cold. But you see the effect. You see what she's looking like. Not too terrible bad. So guys, let's take a look at what we've got here. And you can see the difference in these two pieces is really kind of striking. You can see where this piece comes up here, but you've got so much more meat. It looks more professional, looks more finished. Now, to the common observer, if you hung these up in the store to sell side by side, nobody would know the difference. You got to remember that a lot of this nuance is just for us in being good smiths. But you can clearly see we've got two different size cages. On this one, I didn't hammer down on it to open it up to swell it, so you can see a little bit more swell here. But again, we've got even rods, so neither of these are bad pieces. They're just a difference in the technique. Clearly, one takes more time than the other, but again, you're just going to have to figure out where you fall with all this. But for all intents and purposes, we now have two good handles, and we are ready to make our shovel on this one. All right, everybody, we are ready to get going here. And a couple of things before we start getting to the actual shovel itself. If you can see, these two guys are lined up. We actually left these long, if you remember. We didn't worry about trying to size these for spacing because we're going to have to figure out exactly what we need. So this piece is now too long. And so what we're going to need to do, my shovel is going to be, I believe, 6 inches in length. Now, this is actually my paper pattern here. So in order for this to be reasonably matched up, I'm going to need to come back and take, let's see. If I want it to line up, I'm going to need to take my paper pattern and figure out where both of them are going to be reasonably the same length. So I'm going to end up taking about 4 inches off of this piece right here. And then we're simply going to flatten out that bottom edge. That's going to give us a platform to rivet through. This is one of those places that you want to use your cross peen or your straight peen to spread the metal left and right. Just don't flatten it like that. Go ahead and give it a good spread. The wider that piece is, the more stability and the strength it's going to have when you attach it to the back of your shovel. But let me make a mark with some soapstone, and we'll clip this off real quick, and I'll show you what we mean as far as how to forge it out. I've made myself a little mark here so I know where to cut it off at. And just like that, it pops right off. We put that on the floor so we catch something on fire. And now we're going to go right here. And again, what I was talking about, just don't hammer it here. Use your cross peen and spread that metal. Now this is a little too cold. I'm going to go ahead and go back into the fire, but you want to use that cross peen to spread this left and right so you have a wide base to attach your shovel to. Make sure you're holding it the right way. I may have done that once or twice. Now, don't worry. You see I've got that little ragged edge. I don't worry about that too much because what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in and grind that right down. So I don't worry about trying to keep that super even because we have a grinder. We'll finish spreading this out. So I've got a good inch, maybe a little bit more than that width there. It's been taken down to a little less than 1/8 of an inch, and again, that's going to be a good base to attach the shovel. I'll hit it with the grinder, and we'll be good to go. If you don't have a grinder, this is one of those places you need to understand that if you have a hand chisel or even a cutoff hardy, you can lay this piece right across here and cut it, and it will be square. So there's a lot of old techniques you can use to get around having modern techniques, but for this, and to be neat, I'm going to hit it with the grinder. Then, of course, as I got onto everybody's case earlier, what I want to do is I want to come in here and make sure that this entire piece here has been worked, that the edges have been broken at the very least, so that it looks like the entire piece is hand worked, because it will have been. Now, before we move on, I really quickly want to take and show you a little something here that I think is terribly, terribly important. Now, look at how nice and even that piece looks right there. Now, if you were to just see this without having seen it made a few moments ago, you go, man, look at the hammer skill on that guy. So there's this corollary with today in modern industrial metalwork that a grinder makes you a better welder. Well, believe it or not, a grinder makes you a better blacksmith. There's a saying from back in the day, he who a good edge will win must first forge thick and then grind thin. I'm always surprised is that nobody really pays attention to the fact that back in the day, files were a huge thing. When you were to do this type of work, there was a tremendous amount that was filed. Your locksmiths, anything that was relatively complicated, all of that was file work. You would forge it reasonably close, and then the file work is what made it precise. It's the same situation with this guy right here. They've had files for thousands of years, and that is what a file or a grinder can take and make what may look like a crappy forging and turn it into a nice piece. So don't forget that forging is only part of the process. So guys, we've got our bar prepped and ready. Now, one thing we're not going to do is, this piece will eventually be turned down to accept the shovel, because you're not going to have a right angle shovel. This is going to be turned down so the shovel points that way. But we're not going to do that yet, and that's going to help us when we actually use a drill press or we're drilling this thing together. This is kind of a modern help you out type deal, because again, this specifically goes if you have a drill press, which is ideal for something like this. This allows you to get it into the drill press without a lot of fuss. So our piece now is ready, and now we need to talk about our shovel body itself. Now, hopefully, I'm going to have a picture that goes up about now that's going to show you the paper pattern that I use for my shovel. It's got some nice tapered sides, and this is a folded shovel. So what the deal is that if you have a swage block that has a nice form, you can do this out of one piece with no cuts. But traditionally in the shop that I was taught in, again, Jay was a fabricator. So what he would do is he'd have a pattern like this, and this guy kind of folds up, the edges come up, they go in, and the top piece wraps over. You'll see what I'm talking about. But it makes a good shovel, and if you don't have a form in the shop, it's a handy way of doing it. It's good. It's solid. It's pretty good stuff. So several different ways to make the shovel. I'm showing you the way that Jay taught me, and maybe we'll have a chance to do one that's a one piece as well. So let's get to work on this. All right, guys, one thing I want to show you here. We're using a piece of 18 gauge right now, and hang on, me do the giraffe thing. We're using a piece of 18 gauge right now, and we're going to put our paper pattern on here. There are only 2 interior cuts to this whole thing, and again, reference the image I put up earlier. You can see that this little tab right here, that's the only place you're going to cut this. This is going to allow you to fold the sides in and the back over. If you want to do yourself a favor and you've got a pattern like this that's just a disposable piece of paper, it really helps if you'll just take some spray adhesive and glue this to your metal and then cut it out. That's a real handy way. It sacrifices your pattern, but you can make those easy. It makes it a lot easier to handle and to cut out. It's a good deal. Try it out. I want to have a quick talk about cutting sheet metal. Since we're going to be using 18 gauge, this is pretty thin stuff, but it's still very sturdy. It's thicker than the metal you're going to find on your car or anything like that. Cutting 18 gauge is no joke. If you think that you're going to get a pair of like metal snips and it's going to work, you can hang that up. You're going to need some industrial size honkers to do this effectively. Now, if you don't have these, the good news is the old standby, the simple chisel. If you will put this on top of a metal piece, you can actually cut this whole pattern out with a chisel relatively easily. You can use a plasma torch. If you have access to a big machine shop, you may even have a bandsaw to cut it out with. But for most of you just starting out, please do not underestimate the power of a chisel. Just lay it on there and cut through it like you would anything else. Will take you a little bit of time. You're going to need to clean up the edges a little bit more because you're going to have a bit of a jagged edge in there, but it will work. In my shop, one of the things that I bought and paid a lot of money for, this is called a Beverly shear. You can see it's actually got a mechanical gearing system here that adds to your power. So for something like this, even as big as I am and with as much leverage here, it's not great trying to cut through 18 gauge. But with this Beverly shear, this guy right here will eat it. The Beverly shear is also the only shear. This is also known as a throatless shear. You can actually cut circles with this guy. If you've ever done any type of armor work or been been around anybody that's in the SCA that does armor work, this is kind of the shear of choice. This is also used a lot in car auto body work, especially in NASCAR, where they do a lot of custom stuff. Goes right through it. The Beverly shear can be used for leather, a couple of other things, but you can see how quickly it goes right through there. I'll also use it to go ahead and trim it up, and I'll nip the edges, and we'll take a look. Now, one thing I want to throw at you, here's my pattern cut out. You can see I've got my little notches cut here. This is 5 inches side to side. There is a reason it is that measurement. It's not simply arbitrary because of the size shovel that I want. The back end of my anvil is 4.5 inches across. So what that does is that gives me a little bit of playroom to be able to form this over the back side of my anvil, which is going to be important now. You don't have to do this hot. This can be done cold, and you're going to see how this works. We're first going to fold up the edges. We're going to stand them up. We're going to bend our ears in, and then this top piece is going to fold over that. Here we go. I'm not going to use this heavier hammer. I'm going to grab my other one, as long as this one cooperates. There we go. And again, this is where having your paper pattern kind of glued to everything helps. So I'm going to lay that right over the edge, just like that. I'm lining this line up. And now we're going to fold that wing down. Okay, you can see there, wing still extended, but now we've got our fold. Do the same thing over here. Now, look, because this side can fit across, I can lay it over the anvil. If I was too narrow, I would not be able to use that edge. But because I've planned ahead a bit, I'm good to go. Now we have both sides that are raised. And now what we want to do, we'll use the anvil again and fold these tabs in. Now, you see that what we're coming up there? That's because it's too wide. So if we turn it around like this, guess what? Now we can set it to the edge and fold it in, no problema. There we are. We've got the tabs folded in. And now, this is where we're going to take our flap here and fold it down over those tabs. Make sure everything's lined up well here. Again, being able to have this fit over the back of the anvil affords you so much ability to tighten this thing up and make a neat fold. Now the finishing touch here, if you can see, we've got about 3/8 of an inch, ½ inch that sticks above this piece. This is going to be folded over there, and that's going to lock everything into place, and we'll be ready with our shovel. Now, this is something that I normally end up doing hot. That's a pretty tight bend. It's kind of hard to get it to fold over cold. So I'm going to throw this in the fire, heat it up, and then I'll come in, easily work it over with the hammer, and then tighten it up. Or you can take a pair of pliers and roll it over. There's a couple different ways to attack this, but we're going to do it hot. So let's fire it up. Now, one caveat to remember about working sheet metal in the forge: it's thin, super thin, and it gets hot quick. Don't bury this in your coals, or that's where it's going to go to its grave. Usually keep it on top of the fire where you can see it and watch that temperature. Normally, because I'm handling this stuff, you need a tight grip, and most of your tongs aren't going to do a great job. So normally what I'll do is I'll take a pair of tongs like this to manipulate it in the fire. But when I go to work on it, I have a set of mechanical pliers to really get a good grip on it so I can work on it. All right, you guys can see we've got a good hotness going on here. I'm going to coax it down. And you can see that this side over here is kind of cool. I'm going to put it back in the fire. I'm only going to work this while it's really, really hot. So I'll walk the heat over and continue to fold it. We've got our other side. And once we've got it folded there, then I'll come in and complete that rollover. And now, once again, we're able to go over the edge of the anvil to really cinch it down. Not too shabby bad. You can see we've got a good outline. We've got a good roll there on the inside that you can see. And yeah, we're good to go. Good, solid, good looking shovel. I'm going to hit it just because I feel like it. Okay guys, let's talk about how you're going to rivet this piece to the handle. Now if you look here, you can see that we've got 3 holes in here and 1 hole in here. I have got this main top hole there. So this is how you line it up, because doing 1 rivet hole is easy. You drill a hole and it automatically lines up. But when you do the next holes, how in God's name do you get them to line up perfectly? Well, here's the trick. First thing that we're going to do, we've got the 1 hole here. We're going to put a rivet and rivet this together. At that point, we've already got these holes drilled, and guess what? We can use those as guides to drill the next one. So this goes on top here, rivet it in. We go to the second hole and drill it, and it cannot move. It has to be in that same hole. Therefore, we put our second rivet in, and then the third one's a breeze. Again, this is why also it's very important that this piece be able to fit over the end of your anvil, because when you get ready to drill it, you can't drill it from this side. You need to drill it from the back side. If you just sit there on the table and you're trying to drill it, you're probably going to end up with a drill bit through the hand. Being able to take the end of the anvil and set this down provides a good solid base for you to be able to drill. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab and by the way, these are 1/8 of an inch holes, and I believe that I use a 6-penny common bright nail from any hardware store as my rivet. I'll show you. Okay guys, I've got my nail right here. Just going to go in the front side. Now I'm going to put this on the corner because I want this to be resting very flat and very firmly. I don't want any weeble wobble in there. This goes into place. I'm going to leave about 1/8 of an inch. I'm going to pop that off. Now, this is very important, again, that your nail is square to that anvil, because if it's not, it's going to bend, and that's a very bad thing. You'll be fighting this joker to the end of time. So, now, oftentimes, it is difficult to get this first one set. But you can see she's coming right along. Now, of course, you're looking at this going, oh my God, it's crooked. Well, now that we've got it halfway set, now that I can adjust it and straighten it out and make sure she's right once she's set. Now I go across the back end. And I work it down. Once I've got it seized from the back, I also want to work the front. So now I can flip it around, set it down. Now, if you noticed, even though I had the back side, it was secure a moment ago, when I started working the front, it came loose. This is going to happen. That's why we end up working it from both sides. Now again, don't go super crazy with this first one. All you want to get it to do is seize, because you've still got the other ones to do. There we go. Now, again, it's not, I'm trying to fight the camera, folks, forgive me. You can see it's got a good bite to it. It's not completely locked down. Don't worry about that. When we come back in here and drill these holes, and we get our second one in that locks it into position, then you can worry about really getting in there and locking everything down with your rivets. All right, here we are with our second hole drilled. Again, going in the front with our nail rivet. Coming here again, I'm going to leave about 1/8 of an inch. Snip it. Now, to make this a little easier for myself, I'm actually going to put it over here. And again, I'm looking to make sure that that nail is seated on the anvil. If it's going crazy, you're going to have a problem. It's tagged in from the backside. We've still got a little bit of play, but that's okay. Let's work it from the front. And then to the back one more time. Okay. And we're looking pretty good. Looking pretty good. Here we are with our third piece. Pops in right there. Again, about 1/8 of an inch. Watch your eyeballs on that. Those tend to fly around a good bit. I usually start with the flat of the hammer and then move over to the ball peen. Just working on the front side. Still got a little bit of a wobble there. Just working a little bit more. Oh, there she goes. She sat down nice then. And guys, there you go. Now, one thing I want to show you guys, if you check that out, you can notice we've got a little bit of a cant in there. Don't worry about that. That's going to be natural. If you're fighting this and you're having a bad day, it's not going to be perfectly square. The good news is when we come in here to bend this, we can fix that when we bend it. So don't worry if you're a little off. Now, if it's a lot off, God help you. All right, we are ready to actually bend our shovel, but disaster has struck. How did I not see it? If you'll notice that if I were to bend this shovel back into place now, my handle's the wrong way. So what are we going to do about that? Well, we're going to add ourselves a nice decorative twist right here in the middle. So first things first, we're going to drop this in the fire, take it over to the vise, and make us a twist. Now, you don't have to go crazy with this. You can, though. There's a lot of people that do this thing completely reverse twist, all that kind of good stuff. But for us, we're just going to put a nice 180-degree twist, just something to accent the piece. Nothing fancy. A little bit more there. It's looking good. Actually, that looks like a little bit too much. We'll take a little bit of that out. See that my vise bolts are getting a little loose. Pay attention here. It got bent a little bit, so I'm actually going to straighten it back. Straight as an arrow, ready to go. And now we're going to do something very similar. We will heat this guy up right here and simply bend it down. Okay, guys. Well, we're looking good here. And so one of the things I kind of forgot, I had to reshoot a little bit of this. So if there's not some continuity in there, understand what happened. So One of the older vices that we had a special attachment that would allow you to bend this in the vise with it being held. However, you guys aren't going to have that. So I decided to actually do a little bit of a reshoot here and show you how to bend this on the anvil. Because that's the best way to do it if you don't have a way to vise it in. You want that bend to kind of be right there on that edge, and you can't really use a bending tool or bending fork to do that well, but you can do it with the hammer on the anvil. So we're going to take a heat on this side, and then we're actually going to bend it on the anvil. All right, here we go. Again, lay it on the edge of the anvil here, and tap while you raise this up. And voila. Now, once this cools down, you're probably going to need to tighten your rivets back up just a little bit, but you can see the effect works very, very well. Let's take a look, and we can see we're pretty well lined up. We got a straight angle on there. We got a good bend. There's not any play in there. It's good and solid. We have our super decorative twist right there, and of course our forge welded handle. And that is not a bad looking piece. So guys and gals, there you are. Here's your very own shovel and your very own poker. We've got a dual wield situation going on now. There are so many variations to this shovel, I can't even begin to list them. Again, this folded type is pretty cool. Again, that's the way Jay did it. I have done it with a single piece. And if you have the mold, if you have the piece to actually form it, it's arguably easier. But this tends to be a little bit easier for you beginners starting out there because it's basically just folding paper. It's a metal origami, if you will. So, and I cannot stress enough, you know, guys, when you really get to doing good work, it's the little things that make the difference. When I go to look for a piece, I'm looking for those forge welds. I don't want to see anything that's forced. And that piece that's got the piece added onto it is far superior in my mind to this one. So details matter. Folks, man, this has been a marathon day. I think I've been out here for most of the day shooting. It's raining, but I think the microphone is doing a great job of covering that up simply because in the old days, of course, our microphone, you could not shoot out here with the rain. But, guys, everything is super awesome. Again, thank you so much for coming and watching the show. I remind you, please, I know it's aggravating, please like, comment, and subscribe. It helps us on the back end because we want to keep bringing you good content. You know the deal. Guys, thank you so much, and I'll see you next time on part 3 of our fire tool video. You guys be good. Don't you know you always stay after the credits of the movie? So, the magnet trick. Was it actually magnifying the ends in opposite that stuck these things together? Absolutely not. What actually stuck them together was the tack weld I had conveniently hidden on the back side of the piece. I also swapped the pieces when I went to pick them up, so when you saw the two pieces weren't together, I had an identical piece sitting right beside it. Just a little bit of sleight of hand and some skillful lying. Now, why did I do this? Folks, the internet is full of bad information. There's going to be lots of people like myself. They're good speakers, that are knowledgeable, but they may not have your best interest at heart. I'm going to be the guy that says, hey, how do you know what you know? Now, sometimes we have to take things on reasonable faith, but at the end of the day, trust but verify. Sometimes people don't know any different. And it falls upon you, ultimately, the viewer, to be able to sort out what's right and what's complete bullcrap. Folks, I enjoy doing these videos. And the reason that I do some things like this is because I want you to be suspicious of me. When you watch a video from now on, you're going to say, you got to be careful with him. He's tricky. And that means that everything that I say, you're going to examine, cross-examine, go do some study, and figure out whether I'm right or not. Imagine if you didn't have that suspicion for me, and it was somebody that you just took at face value. That is how con artists work, ladies and gentlemen. How do you know what you know? Folks, at the end of the day, it is your responsibility to be able to filter out good information from bad information. And for all the good that's out there on YouTube, there's a lot of bad. So my advice for you on that end of it, if you see something that smells a little off, do your research. Be suspicious. Be skeptical. Even for me, I don't want you to trust what I say. I want you to see if it works. That is the mark of somebody who truly cares about what they believe is true, and that's the person that's going to have the best information out there. Folks, thank you for watching. I'll see you again soon.